Welcome to DZR Gaming's The Armory. This is your host, Hoagie. The Armory is all about taking an in-depth look into the division, the gear, the guns, and the strategies that you need to take back New York. Hey, this is our first episode. I'm so glad that you guys are here with us. We have some guests, some hosts here. Before I get to introducing them, I want to tell you a little bit about what this show is. This is the first time you're probably hearing it. This show is all about an in-depth look on gear, guns, and strategies in the division. And so we're going to be looking at gear sets. We're going to be looking at guns. We're going to be talking about some of the mainstream things and strategies of gearing up or god rolls or what to roll or what our builds look like. And we're also going to be looking at some other options and how we can really maximize our builds in our teams so we can get the most out of high-level gameplay in the division. I'm going to be hosting every single week, but then we're also going to have some experts on, including Origami Train, Captain Underdog, Red Donkey Ham, some other community guests from our DZR Discord, and then I'm sure we're going to have some other special guests, some guys from the original DZR podcast. We might get some special outside voices that have been part of the mainstream kind of content. We'll see what that looks like. We're really excited that you're with us, and we're excited to share this awesome content with you. So tonight we have two really special guest hosts or co-hosts with me. The first is Origami Train. What's happening, Origami?
Hey, how's it going? Lovely day here for the podcast.
Nice. Cool. And also we have Captain Underdog. What's up, Captain?
Nothing much. How y'all doing today?
Good. Before we jump into this week's content, Origami, I want to hear, and Captain, I want to hear a few things just to introduce you guys to our listeners a little bit. You guys haven't been on the DZR podcast yet, and so I want to just hear a little bit about you guys and our listeners too. So three real quick questions. One is, what's your gaming history? What did you start on? Second is, what made you pick up the division? And then how did you find Dark Zone Report? How did you find DZR? Origami, why don't you go first?
Sure. My first shooter was Duck Hunt back in the mid-'80s.
Classic.
A lovely Nintendo system. Worked my way through Nintendo, Super Nintendo, and then into PC gaming when I was in my late teens, and played a lot of Rainbow Six back then, and really enjoyed the planning strategy tactics of that series. Later on, got into the Ghost Recon series as well as the Rainbow Six Vegas and some others. And so that really leads me into the division because in Ghost Recon Future Soldier, we had a really good community of gamers. When you picked up a game, you could find some people that were really, really into the game and played it well, but they were a small community. And, most people had kind of left that series for Battlefield, Call of Duty, Medal of Honor, etc. And so when the division...
Destiny, maybe?
And some Destiny later on, yeah, as well. I played Destiny a little bit, but when I sort of heard about the division coming out, I was waiting and pitching a tent out in front of the GameStop to see when it was going to get released. And
nice.
So I was really interested in it from the very beginning, just because I knew it was going to be a cover shooter, it was going to be a third-person shooter, and that it was going to be a lot more in-depth than some of the other shooting games that I had played previously, and I was looking for something a little deeper. Yeah, shortly before the game was released, I picked up the beta and played through that, and at the time was getting into podcasting because my kid was born in February, and we had to drive a few hours to do some medical visits, and so I needed something to listen to in the car, and I started listening to podcasts and said, hey, I wonder if there's something for this game that I'm playing. And lo and behold, I found a few different podcasts, but the one I really settled on was DZR. I thought it was a really good mix of analysis and personalities, and it was coming out frequently enough and spending enough time on the details of the game even before the release that it was definitely got me hooked very, very quickly, and I've been here ever since.
Nice. That's awesome. It's cool to hear your Tom Clancy background. And I mean, not a lot of his games have been RPG. To see you diving so into the RPG side of it is really cool. I'm glad that you're here. Yes. What about you, Captain? What's your gaming history? What made you pick up the division, and how did you find DZR?
I think my first game was Pong. We had a TI Basic and did some of the side scrollers. After that, of course, Nintendo and Sega. Went to the computer games, started out with Delta Force 2. Really kind of got lost in that with a bunch of guys, military guys, and then got away from it and went through the Halo series. After that, a lot of WoW. Spent many years playing World of Warcraft. Then my son grabbed 2 copies of The Division about a week after it came out, and we started playing together and just really started enjoying it. It's kind of like World of Warcraft with guns for me. And after that, I started looking for a podcast, going back and forth to work. Started listening to the Rogue Agent Radio. Enjoyed that for a while, but I found DZR and joined the Discord and the community, and it's just the best gaming community I think I've been a part of ever.
That's awesome. So for those of you that are maybe listening and haven't listened to some of the original DZR shows, go back and give a listen. They're awesome. There have been plenty of other podcasts that have come out on that channel, but check it out. They're fun to listen to. Hey, so this first episode I'm really excited about. We're going to be talking about gear and guns and strategies and builds and all that stuff. But this first episode, we kind of wanted to take a look back on The Division, because we're how many months in? It's going to be 5 months, or just about 5 months when we're recording. And, the game has gone through a really big change from the beginning till now, and it's going to keep changing. So we want to kind of wanted to look back on the meta from the beginning of the game till now and walk through each of the updates. And then at the end, kind of to ask that question, where are we going? So, hey, Origami, why don't you take it away with the very beginning? You were just saying you were playing the beta. Mm-hmm. When the first game came out, give us a quick rundown. What did the game look like then?
Definitely people were really trying to figure out how they fit within this. It was a different game. And a lot of people started chasing 3 or 4 different things all at the same time. Savage Gloves became a must-have for most of the players. If you could get it, you were doing really well. And I think at that point, a lot of people didn't necessarily know what they needed yet, but definitely the folks that were paying attention, getting in the weeds that early on, were looking for the Savage Gloves. That extra critical damage, the critical hits out of cover, were just quite helpful early on. A lot of people were using Reckless Chess as well. At the time, it was bugged. It was supposed to be increasing your damage, but also increasing the damage that you took. But of course, the bug did that a little backwards. So that extra damage you were supposed to be taking turned out to be damage resilience.
That was a handy one.
It was nice to have if you could get it, but it was certainly announced early on that was going to get fixed, and we did find later on. We'll talk about that, I'm sure. That fix did come. SMGs were the thing, especially the Vector. It's interesting. The Vector is one of those weapons that in various games over the last several years has been popular as a cosmetic item, but tends to not be the greatest weapon in the group. And in the Division, it certainly was the dominant weapon to have, as well as the M1A. The SMG damage on the Vector was solid despite the low mag size, but the accuracy was great. It was really stable. You could get all your shots on target, so everybody liked that. The M1A had basically the same thing happening, although that wasn't on purpose. The bug to the M1A with the balance talent ended up allowing players to really headshot when shouldering very easily, because the reticle bloom that was supposed to be there really wasn't. And so people had a hell of a time playing with anything other than an M1A. Really were not interested in other weapons until that bug got fixed later. Yeah. And that's largely the beginning stages of this. Everybody was kind of figuring it out, trying to understand not only the game mechanics, but how to fit into this world that sort of looked like it might be a Battlefield or Call of Duty, but it sure wasn't acting like one.
Yeah.
And I think that gets us into the 1.1 release.
Yeah, that Vector too had because it's a 45 caliber weapon. It had more damage also, and so it even burst damage. That's one of the reasons that people were picking that up. But I remember getting into the game as we're going to be talking about 1.1 in a second. Getting in the game, and every single person had Savage, Reckless, and vectors and M1As, and that was it. It was just, and they were crafting those vectors over and over and over and over and over. It was crazy. I saw people, crafting 50, 60, 70 vectors for the perfect roll. Just insane. And so,
Well, and crafting was easy with that, too. So, and the funny thing is, I didn't have any of those things. This is a stage that I wasn't really paying attention enough to the weeds, and so I didn't have the Savage Gloves. I didn't have the Reckless Chest. I was running around with a bunch of random weapons, but none of them were the Vector, and I could not find an M1A for the life of me until really right before the 1.1 release. So, yeah. But definitely I was getting wrecked by people who had figured this stuff out.
Awesome. So as we're jumping into 1.1, and the 4 original sets were Sentry, Striker, Tactician's Authority, and Nomad. And Nomad, sadly, we won't talk about that much because it still sucks. It's got its place, but definitely not it's probably the least or second least favorite of the 13 that are available right now. And so Sentry was the big winner there. We know Sentry, it's the 4-piece set. We'll talk about some of the more specific 2-piece bonuses, 3-piece bonuses in some later shows, but for the most part the 4-piece Sentry was just awesome because you would tag those guys and then they were just taking insane amounts of damage. And Sentry was, I don't know if it was bugged. They throw that word out. It wasn't being used as intended. It was supposed to be a marksman, but turns out it worked with SMGs. So all those vectors that people were rolling with, or whatever SMG that people liked at the time. You could put 3 shots on that and do the same damage. And so everybody was rolling with Sentry because it was just putting so much damage out, and they could use them with their favorite SMG. And then the other side is, they might be using 2-piece Striker or the Reckless Chest, which were still bugged, and Savage Gloves. People started using the AUGs and MP5s during this time, I remember. And again, SMG was just ruling the gameplay just because the crit chance wasn't capped at the time at 60% like it is now. And so you could get crit chance all the way up to 100 without much difficulty. The crit chance on the AUGs or the high-end submachine guns would be 25, 26%. You throw 13% on that with the Savage Gloves and then you're at 40% already. So you get a max pulse. And then you get your crit chance from your Savage Gloves and your SMG, and you're almost at 100% at crit chance. And so people were just burning through guys. And so that's what was happening. Just all SMGs, all Sentry, and then just high crit chance. Also, during this 1.1, it was either 1.1 or 1.2. I don't remember precisely. But we actually had our health stat change from health to toughness. And so again, toughness is basically just your health stat plus your armor mitigation, and that's the big number that comes up in that middle toughness spot. When the game originally came out, though, it was just your health. And so I really liked that change when they made it. What about you guys, Captain? What do you remember about 1.1?
What I remember of 1.1 the most is going through Falcon Lost with Bad Cuttlefish, who's also in the Discord.
Yeah.
And just watching him just melt through the enemies with his AUG like they were butter. That thing was just amazing, especially with the added bullets from the magazine. I remember also they were using Sentry and throwing on the 2-piece Striker for the extra damage bonus. Either that or using the Reckless Gloves and the Reckless Chest Piece and the Savage Gloves. Now, I was kind of like Origami in that sense because coming in right there on the tail end, trying to get my M1A and my Vector, I think I rolled probably about 10 or 15 of those before I found one that I really liked. Sentry, everybody was trying to get Sentry, but my first set was Striker, and it was pretty brutal, especially you just had to keep your crane on target. Watch out for that potato aim.
Well, now, what about 1.2, Captain? You want to walk us through what was 1.2 like when that came out? And that was just a couple months ago now.
That's right. With 1.2, they did finally fix the balance on the M1A, and that, of course, broke a lot of people's hearts because that thing was just a laser. Very little recoil, and the reticle just stayed trained on target. They fixed it so that the sentries weren't no longer procced whenever you used SMGs, so People started using pistol for a quick 3 mark, then pull out their AUG or SMG of choice and burn them down. I also know a lot of people that use the 3-3 and the 3-2-1 combo, so they'd use 3 sentry and 3 striker, and they could also use 3 sentry, 2 striker, and then the savage gloves for that increase in damage. That extra damage really made it invaluable in PvP.
Now remind me, what's the bonuses on sentry and striker?
Alright, for sentry it was for a 2-piece 30% headshot damage.
Nice.
The 3-piece gave you 20% damage to elites, and the 4-piece propped the Stalker's Mark, which added 15% additional damage per mark. Mark lasted 10 seconds per target. But with that 3-piece, you could also add the 2-piece striker for that enemy armor damage.
I could see why people were running that, right?
And with the 3-2-1 combo, you could just melt them down with the extra enemy armor damage, that 20%. And then you add the 13 or 14% for the Savage Gloves. And then you add onto that the headshot damage included on the Sentry. It was just really taking them out pretty quick. With that increase in damage, using that, I believe that came really the meta in 1.2.
Now, remind me, when did 1.1 really, I'm sorry, 1 is none, really become a big deal? Was it at the very beginning of the game? Was it 1.1, 1.2? Because it seemed like there was a time where some people ran it and some people didn't, and then all of a sudden, if you weren't running it, you're an idiot. So when was that? Do we remember?
It really started at 1.1. 1.1, 1 is none was a great thing. People started noticing that whenever it would proc, it would happen on the last bullet of the magazine. They weren't able to fire their weapons, so they'd have to swap back and forth until they were able to fire their weapons again. So, of course, if this happens to you in the dark zone, there's nothing you can really do. When your weapon locks up on you, you're pretty much dead. And like I said earlier, whenever they tried to fix it from 1.1 to 1.2, they fixed the original problem, but created a worse problem, because if you want to keep max ammo in your magazine, which you always do in the dark zone, you're going to try to reload, and that'll lock up your weapon, and it just really cause problems.
Well, I'm glad it's fixed now. What else in 1.2 stuck out to you?
The other thing in 1.2 is everybody was running triage. With triage, you could just shoot it on the ground, run back and forth, and recharge all your skills real quick. That thing was just fantastic. I know a lot of people running through the dark zone back then with that infinite sticky bomb, and that thing is just great. Recharge it, shoot it on the ground, run through it a few times, and then your sticky bomb's ready to go again. Yeah, another big thing was the final measure, which really comes in handy with that exotic damage resilience, especially now when 1.3 is coming real handy. Then there was also the Lone Star 2-piece where you get double the ammo. Everybody was using that to stock up, coupled with a police backpack, swap back to your regular gear, have twice as much ammo. See, there was also a big push for toughness, changed the toughness number, so I know everybody was trying to get that number up, so they increased the armor cap to 75%. A 75% armor cap coupled with 100k health gave you your 400k toughness.
Yeah.
And with that 400k toughness, you pop on a max smart cover. That's what you're shooting for. That's ideal. After the toughness, the other thing, people started noticing how helpful skill power was. It seemed like they realized that the more skill power they had, they could just throw out a pulse, and the higher your pulse was, the better your critical damage, the better your critical hit chance, and even if your DPS was a little low, it would definitely bring it back up with that bonus damage you would get from it. You couple that with a max smart cover, and it really help out. And then if it recharged that quick, you could also do your overheal. So with the extra damage from a pulse, the extra damage resistance, and also damage you're dealing from a smart cover and your overheals with the extra ammo from your Lone Star, you can just sit on the smart cover and burn them down.
That's so funny. I remember, again, I feel like it's just forever ago, but it was just a few months ago, is that I remember seeing things like 350k DPS.
That's right.
In that 1.2 or 1.1 era, and it was just like, that was the rage. Now it's all about like who can get 600k toughness, and it's just really interesting to see how that changed. And you were talking about the 75% armor, and before, just as a reminder, it went from 65% to 75% in that patch. So that was really interesting. And like you said, again, that move towards skill power, and people really started to realize. I really wonder why that is. You see some of the meta changing, and I wonder if it's just the player base was changing, because people jumped in saying, okay, this is a shooter, this is a Tom Clancy game, whatever. And then as time went on, is it just some of those people dropped out, and that the people who were really more RPG focused started to do things and think outside the box a little bit?
I think a couple other things happened with 1.2 because skill power became my big push about that time. And part of it was that tactician pieces were the things that were dropping for me. Throughout 1.1, I was only getting Nomad. And then 1.2, I started getting tactician pieces. And because of the DZR Discord, I was starting to link up with players who wanted to push the envelope a little bit. And wanted to jump into challenge mode Falcon Lost, get some better gear. What we started to notice, especially in Clear Sky, was that you couldn't just DPS your way through that incursion. You needed the tankiness, and especially on challenge mode, you needed the skill power. So I think the combination of some players dropping off because it wasn't a shooter, it was an RPG, and the additional difficulty of 1.2 over 1.1, as well as people starting to recognize that you play with what you have, really brought skill power out and made it something worth having. Especially because this was always intended as a squad-based cooperative game, and certainly up until 1.2, everyone soloed the DZ, soloed the story missions. I mean, I didn't link up with my first person even for random matchmaking until I was probably level 35 in the DZ and had completed all the story missions solo. So 1.2 really drove that team-based play, and skill power became a big part of that because people started noticing that it had an effect.
Yeah.
And my thoughts is 1.1 DPS was king. With a higher DPS, you just burn them down as fast as you can. Don't really worry about your toughness, just popping over, heal, and go. When 1.2 came along, I think it balanced it all out, where people realized the importance of skill power and how it could really boost you overall with your resistances and also with your damage and your recovery. And Origami will laugh at me because I know whenever we run DZ all the time, I'll run that airburst sticky bomb and that thing. I just love it because when you got a high skill power, you just throw it out there. It rolls over to them, bursts into the air, comes back down, sets them all on fire. They're all running, screaming. It's just fantastic. You know, with the higher skill power, you know, it really made the skills where they were a good part of the game and made them useful, where we weren't utilizing to their full extent back then.
Awesome. Well, hey, we're going to keep moving along. Just as a show note, these episodes are going to be probably around 30 minutes-ish. So we're going to keep moving. We're just trying to make a shorter show than the longer show to pack some information in. So we're trying to get through a bunch of stuff. Don't worry, we're going to go back and talk about more specifics of gear sets and different things of how the game is now in the next few shows. So no worries. Well, hey, 1.3 came out on the scene. It was about 2 months ago now, wasn't it? This was the first time that a serious weapon balance came. You know, up until 1.2, again, everyone was still running SMGs because that crit chance was still just the best. And so weapon balances came into the game, and that was a really game changer. You know, first there was a few nerfs that were really quite interesting. The first one is the M1A's accuracy bloom was nerfed. Now, we talked about the balance talent being fixed, you know, quotation marks fixed or nerfed, whatever you want to say. But really, we can say that the accuracy on the M1A was actually nerfed at this time. It wasn't a bug. They really just nerfed the gun because it was still just dominating everybody's repertoire. It was still, that was the gun that they had. And I would say still, though, most people are still carrying an M1A. But it's probably just a little less effective now, but it's still probably the best sniper that people are carrying. The next nerf that came out to much wrath was the Vector and AUG were both nerfed. I think it was a 10% damage nerf, and it was just straight nerf. No, there's no bones about it. I think they might have tried to put the balanced word on it, but whatever. It was a nerf. And so, again, they were looking at their numbers and saying people are using Vectors, AUGs, and M1As, and we want them to use different guns, which I'm actually okay with. You know, I was running with an AUG, and it was good, but, like, I'm okay with using other guns. And so that wasn't a huge deal for me. And the guns that we see now, we just see all sorts of guns. And so here's some more of the rebalancing, or the balancing of the weapons. SMGs, originally they had a native talent that they had crit chance. Well, that crit chance was gone, and it was now crit damage. And so now we had to find that crit chance in other places. Also, I think it was during 1.3 where they put a hard cap on crit chance. Before, you could get all the way up to 100. Now it's capped at 60, so no matter what you do, you can't crit chance over 60%, which is still a pretty decent number. Some other weapon balancing. They gave the shotguns a native talent of increased stagger chance. And so I've seen numbers of like 250% chance stagger. Now that was just for PvE. We'll see how they work that into PvP down the road. But that was a major factor. People started using shotguns, because of the stagger chance on enemies. Okay, assault rifles. They gave them an armor damage, a native talent of armor damage. And so right now, my favorite gun is still a G36. And I think it has about 23% armor damage, and it shoots awesome, and I love it. It feels great. And so all ARs after the 1.3 patch have native armor damage. Now, when it originally came out, I just mentioned the G36. The G36 was like absolutely a beast when it came out. The stability was fantastic. The accuracy was really great. And it was what everybody was getting. So much so that about a week after it came out, they nerfed it. It's still, I think it's still the best assault rifle, but it just dominated the game for about a week, which was actually really nice. I don't know about what you guys think, but after seeing so many AUGs and so many vectors, seeing an assault rifle was just good. Even if it was a little strong, that's okay. It was good to see other guns.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The variety of weapons that I run with now is very different from before, and I really like that about this release. I think it was a necessary change.
Yeah, and then the last one. I mean, it's a circus here. The LMGs didn't have anything, no native talents before, and people were obviously wanting to use them because having my M60 200 rounds in the mag is just like awesome to unload. But they really were just like, there was no use in using LMGs because they just didn't hit hard enough. And you just couldn't use them. And so they have a native talent now of damage out of cover. And right now, actually, my first primary weapon is an RPK-74, and it's got 32, right around 32 damage out of cover, and it's awesome. And I have a rate of fire mag, and it also has stability on it, which boosts its stability by 47%. And the thing is just, I play on PS4, and so I can just control it really well. And I have Brutal on it. And man, that thing is just really awesome right now, and I haven't found anything that has been able to mess with it. And so I'm running an RPK-74 and a G36 right now. Brutal, deadly, and stable, and I forget the third talent on the G36. What about you guys? What guns are you running right now?
I have a few different builds that I'm working with. I use a Deadeye 4-piece with an M1A, and I generally use an MG for my secondary, which is very useful for that out-of-cover damage bonus. On my main character, I run a complete mix of weapons. I keep a G36 always, and I keep an SVD mostly because I like the sound it makes, which isn't the best reason, but hey, we all have our quirks. I also keep an SMG, currently a PP19, but sometimes I'll run with an MP7, and then I keep a couple LMGs in my bag. I like the L86 for the damage it does, but I also like to keep a Mark 46 or an M249 Para, something with some real suppressing power with a big bag mag, and then I also keep tactical SASG 12K. That's a must for close quarters, in my opinion, and some of these were really good additions in 1.3.
Nice. What about you, Captain? What guns are you running?
Well, I found a good G36, which I really like. PP19, which is pretty good with that extra ammo mag. My first wave X45 with cool headed on it. That thing is fantastic. I will have to say that Origami has slowly been converting me over to the SASG, the M870, and all the shotguns, especially when running Sentry. Shotgun Sentry is a really nice build to run, especially when you're doing incursions. I've tried out quite a few, but I haven't really found any LMGs that I really like. I've really wanted to like them, I just haven't. Now, as far as marksman, I usually run an M1A. I have a pretty decent one of those. It also has cool-headed. And I keep an SVD because I also really like the way that thing sounds and the way it comes back on target. And I really like how stable that thing is.
Nice. Awesome. Well, hey, there's a few more things, and then we're going to jump into a last question before we finish off. Okay, we went through all the weapon rebalances. Hey, we had more gear sets during 1.3 that we didn't even talk about. Reclaimer is a big deal now. Almost every single group, someone's running Reclaimer. It's just, I don't know if they're going to nerf it or what they're going to do, but man, that thing is nice to run with and fun to have somebody in your party with Reclaimer. Another thing is, we talked about the last patch, the skill power is slowly creeping up. Skill powers everywhere. And one of the things that really, one of the reasons why, shout out to Marco Style, his Tactician build was just a huge hit, and that really changed the meta, I think, for a lot of people. So people were rolling armor and skill power everywhere and getting lots of DPS was probably the lowest it's ever been, with toughness being the highest it's ever been, and people running regularly 25, 30K skill power. People just realized how much skills were important in this game, and that's been really interesting. Exotic damage resilience and the immunizer, again, I would probably say Dragon Nest is a big reason for that. You know, those flamethrowers roasting your weenies out on the weekends, you got to stop that. And so people were seeing skills that they've seen the whole game, but starting to use them in different ways. And that's really a mark of 1.3, I would say, is that people are starting to experiment with builds, including the ones that they didn't care about before. Really, they saw no value, but they're going back and looking and saying, okay, how can I make this a valuable build for me? Whether that is adding stamina or adding skill power or doing whatever they want with them, people are really starting to customize their builds. And I think that's awesome. Hey, real quick, Rogue Survival in DZ. I'll be the first to say, I don't really run DZ all that much. I know there was a nerf on the damage taken. Origami, what was that Rogue Survival, that nerf in the DZ for damage?
Yeah, the DZ became a pretty difficult place for a lot of people, especially in 1.3. Even Hamish came out at one point and said, you should stay out of the DZ for a while. When the community manager for the developer says stay out of the DZ, it's probably good advice.
Not a good thing.
The issue is I understood it, though I didn't run into it much myself, was that the Deadeye build, which gives you a 100% critical hit chance on your marksman rifle, is also applying erroneously to shotguns, and that becomes a real problem because you can get one-shotted with a shotgun that hits you critically with every pellet. That has since been fixed, but the DZ is still really rough out there a lot of the time if you're not lucky, and I think that will continue in the short term until we see the next round of new content. I think we've reached an era in the division where we have people who are very invested in the game and in building up not only their own skill but also the community. But we also have people who are just bored, disenfranchised by the game, and want to bring others down with them. Yeah, it's definitely harder to survive in the DZ unless you're lucky or in a really solid group. You certainly can't solo it the same way you could back in 1.1.
Yeah. I will say here at DZR, we love both squeakers and griefers, so all are welcome. Come join. We'd love to have you part of us. Hey, real quick, let's just take a minute each person and say, okay, what is the next step? We just went through the whole history of the meta. I'm sure we got some things wrong. We might get some, some emails or whatever. Where do we see the division going next? What's going to be happening going forward? Captain, why don't you kick us off?
Let's see. The next steps for me is I'm currently looking into those builds that are not widely used right now. I'm really looking to see what combinations I can use to boost their effectiveness and really make them viable. Kind of like the latest one I'm running is the Alpha Bridge coupled with the Predator Smart Gloves, especially for that extra 20% in optimal range, which it makes your SMGs a lot more effective at a longer range. Just really looking to see what perks I can put with them to make them really credible. Just really looking to see what I can do with each build to make it better, because like I say, it doesn't matter which gear you have, you can roll it for your playstyle. So if you like to be the high skill power, the high DPS, or the high toughness, you can pretty much work any build. Just depends on how many credits you have.
Awesome. Hey, if you could pick a change that you think is going to come up from the division, from Massive, that's going to change your game in the next couple weeks, or do you have any guesses about what's going to happen?
I'm not real sure. I'm really looking forward to Survival. I have a feeling we'll get some new gear sets. I think those new gear sets will be geared towards survivability, and maybe they'll even rival the new Tanktician meta. I mean, who knows?
Awesome. What about you, Origami? What do you see coming up? Where are we going?
I think a lot of it depends on the community. As I mentioned before, we have these two factions of gamers who are really committed to building up and people who are really committed to breaking down. And history tells us that the people who are building things like Underdog is talking about tend to outlast the griefers and breakers. And so I think what I anticipate seeing is that the DZ is going to improve over time. I think that may not be based on specific actions from Massive as much as griefers sloughing off as they get bored or caught up by the next new shiny game. And I think that will help make the division community stronger and more collaborative, which will make some of those things that frustrate people better. I also agree with what Underdog says about people starting to try new builds. One of the regular guys in the Xbox world, Scribbles, ran Sentry basically forever. And then around the time 1.3 started, he began to build up a Tanktician. Now he's experimenting with Predator's Mark. Others are spending time developing blended builds. I know Underdog's working on some of those. And I agree. People are starting to have more room to experiment, which can only be a good thing because it helps keeps things new. I myself ran Tactician forever and then Sentry for a bit. Now I'm working with Deadeye, and my enjoyment of the game is new again because of those kinds of things. As far as what Massive does next, I'm very hopeful that the current smart cover immunizer glitches, getting stuck on the ladder, and other big dissatisfiers get fixed quite soon. Because I think that plus the griefing in the DZ keep the most frustration. And I'd like to see some house cleaning of those in-game elements before survival hits. We'll see if that happens.
Yeah. As for me, I really think people are going to start focusing, you guys just talked about how, working on different kinds of gear sets and different builds. I think that's going to lead to the community having more variety, which I think is great. You're going to go in and see something we're going to talk about in some future episodes is team composition. And I really think that we're leaning towards that. We're going to have people that are tanks or tactician. We're going to have people that are running sentry. They're running reclaimer. They're running support, DPS, toughness, all these different things that people are going to start having designated roles. And I think that's awesome. Really, that's what the game wants us to do, but we haven't gotten that far yet. And I really see that as content is getting more difficult and we're having to run different sets of skills and different guns that are actually viable. Again, up until 1.3, you ran with an SMG and a marksman rifle. Now you can run with any gun that you want as long as it has good rolls and you can be effective. And so I can't wait. As far as what's up ahead, we know that we have some guns. The blind rifle is still out there. It's waiting to come and visit us. If it's going to be good, who knows? None of the name weapons has been good so far. Let's hope that actually changes. The frontline set is something that got teased for 1.3, which is you can use your shield and an SMG at the same time. Oh my gosh. Nerds out there everywhere were just drooling, and then we didn't see it. And so, who knows what else is coming. I'm excited. I hope the community continues to stay around and that the new Destiny and other games, don't take too much of the community. I think there's a good game here. Where they're still working stuff out, but I really think that it's only going to get better, I hope. And I really just hope that because of some issues in the past couple months that this game doesn't just slowly start dying. Because honestly, I could see it starting to do that if things don't change, but they haven't done that yet. They have been making changes and been fixing things, and so I'm excited to keep playing this game for months on end. So, hey, that was an awesome first show, guys. For you listeners, we're going to keep having shows every week or every other. Keep checking it out and keep downloading. We're going to be diving into gear sets next. And so taking a whole show, probably 25 to 30 minutes, talking about a specific gear set and saying, okay, what is this gear set? What does it do? What do I need to be looking for? What do I need to be rolling? How can I actually use this gear set effectively? And so, yeah, we're going to be jumping into some of the more popular ones soon. And I can't wait to get that content out to you guys. Hey, you can email us at DZRarmory@gmail.com. Okay, that's DZRarmory@gmail.com. Email us some questions. We'd love to connect with you guys and hear what you guys are thinking. This is a show for the community. And so you are a community. If you guys have questions or thoughts, please email us, DZRarmory@gmail.com. We'll probably be checking the mailbag every once in a while if we found a good one. If you want to learn more about Dark Zone Report, go to darkzonereport.com. If you've been hearing about DZR or haven't heard about us yet and you're listening to this podcast and looking for some people to play with, come check out the DZR Discord. It's a blast. So come check us out. Come have some people to play with. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you guys next week.